Welcome to Crazy Larry's, mostly online school of Wackadoodle Theology for the Reformation and Restoration of the Christian Church in the 21st century. Hi, I'm Larry, and we've spent dozens of dollars to bring this to you. Crazy Larry's mostly online school for Wackadoodle Theology for the Restoration and Reformation of the Christian Church in the 21st century, Season 1, Episode 2, A New Hope. Oh, actually, a new perspective. Well, welcome to Season 1, Episode 2, A New Perspective. I'm Larry, and we are going through this thing called Crazy Larry's Wackadoodle School of Theology for the Restoration and Reformation of the Christian Church in the 21st century. And today, I want to talk about why a new perspective is necessary. First off, I'm going to use some big broad brushstrokes here, but the first thing is that the world of academia, here it is. It is the idea that the higher up you go, the more you have to actually do something new. For master's work, for doctorate work, the idea is to do something new that nobody has ever done, and you have to try to do that, make some kind of connection. Here's the thing. In doctoral studies and doctoral theses and things like that, what happens is that the truth becomes irrelevant. In other words, data will be manipulated, sometimes even ignored, as long as we end up with something new. This is the academic world that we live in today, that we touched base on just a second in that first episode. The reason I think that this is important is that this perspective here actually does not accomplish much, in my opinion. This is Larry's opinion. Doesn't accomplish much, and here's why. Scripture says, and I believe it was Solomon that said, there's absolutely nothing new underneath the sun. If there's really nothing new underneath the sun, why do we sit here and try to prove and try to think that in our pride, we can actually do something new? There's a guy by the name of J. Warner Wallace who's out on the East Coast or West Coast right now, doing this thing called cold case Christianity. Here's a couple things, just something to think about. How bad does your first name with the letter J have to be to actually go by the name of Warner? I've not met the man, I don't know him, but that's humorous to me. But here's my thing with J. Warner Wallace, is that he was a cold case investigator, and one of the things that he does, especially in this idea of cold case Christianity, and he's got some videos out on YouTube and Right Now Media and some things like that. And here's the thing about understanding a cold case, okay? And it is, how close can you get to the original event? One of the things that happens is that our minds over time change our memories of the events. In other words, if I were to watch a car wreck happen right now out this window, I would need to document everything that I'm seeing right now, and pictures would be amazing. I would, over time, because my mind is going to continue to play this and do its things with it over time, will change what I remember and concoct a new memory. And it's interesting to me that in our perspective of how do we get away from cultural churchianity, is that this here and this here still links together with this idea of pride. In other words, look how good I am today. Look how something new that I've done. Let's take a look at something new that I found in Scripture. Let me take a new idea. Let's try to change the Scripture, if we can, to make it fit our times. And what happens is that this up here becomes our number one distractor, and we will settle for new memories, but we will inevitably forget to ask, how close can we get to the original event? So in the first episode, I made a statement that we in our churchianity, our cultural churchianity, is that we're losing our biblical understanding. And wanted to lay out what we just spoke about just a few moments ago about this idea about new versus old. And here's the thing, is that, again, pride comes in, especially on this idea of the new side. But strangely enough, if we want to say, okay, well, so how close can we get to the original, how close can we get to those original thoughts or the original events in Scripture? Strangely enough, we have pride creep in on this side as well. So we sometimes find ourselves in a catch-22. Well, if I want to do new things, my pride will creep in. If I want to see how close can I get to old things, my pride will keep in. And here's the case that I want to make for this, and here's what this pride looks like, okay? And it's that we believe that we are better now than they were back then. So if we're losing our biblical perspective and we're still dealing with pride and new and old things, and we're still trying to figure out how is it that we are still better today than they were back then, how do we change our perspective? Because we still have our preacher who's still in the church, who's still trying to ask the question, how do I get more butts in the pews? He's still over here trying to relate in a Greek world, which is complete foolishness. He certainly doesn't want to go back to this old legalism way of doing things where Jesus becomes a stumbling block. How in the world do we change our perspective, and what do we change it to? So I would like to make the case today that we need to change our perspective to what I call Wackadoodle Theology. It is the idea that in the Greek culture, as Ken Ham lays out in Gospel Reset, that we need to be able to fully well explain our foolishness to the Greek mind, okay? And a lot of this actually comes out of Ephesians chapter 3, verse 9, as that Paul says there that his goal was to make it plain to the church, the revelation of Jesus Christ. In other words, this whole idea focuses on how do we make it plain? How do we make it simple? How do we make it presentable? Way back in Bible college, for me, and this is the academia, there it is. We had this great big $5 word called hermeneutics, principles and theory of interpretation. And what it is that when we went through our hermeneutics class is that we would try to simplify, try to take a look at Scripture and try to answer this. What is the aim, or what was the author's intended meaning? And this works great if you are in an Acts 2 society. This is where our preacher guy in the church is trying to take the Acts 2 principles and trying to fit it into Greek by using this methodology of the author's intended meaning. Where this starts really getting wackadoodle is what I want to lay out here on the next board. So what we have to understand is that what has happened in our world is that we have seen a large domination of this thing called the New Age movement, which is really nothing but old teachings remarketed. Where in the Babylonian system you have spirituality, meditation. It's very much a strange thing like that. If I wanted to try to use big broad brushstrokes to simplify these things, the Egyptian put down pantheism. Very simply, is that there's a multiple gods. There's all these different really crazy things in Egyptian theology, and with Greek, it's very nihilistic. It's very much an all about me thing, which is a really big understanding of where our post-Christian American world is. Now, how do we start talking to a Greek mind, a mind that has been secularized, through the understanding of Scripture? And here it is that Ken Ham makes the case that, well, we need to start our evangelism with creation. 100% agree with that. But here's the thing. When you take a look at what I would call old theology, or the old truths, as far back as we can go, if we're trying to use this cold case Christianity thing, how far back can we go? Here's some things is that we understand that especially the book of Genesis talks about creation, contrary to what I've actually heard modern day biblical authorities in the university want to try to teach. Old Testament is extremely monotheistic, which is really a big stark contrast to spirituality, pantheism, if you want to call it idolatry. There's a big contrast in the old theology about this. And here's the other thing, with the Greek mindset where it's all about me, the old theology actually has built into it that there is an origin story. If the universe is temporal, if it has a beginning, then it also has an end. And if there's an end, we actually have built into the Old Testament an eternal destiny. Now here's what happens. In the idea of a university mindset, when we're trying to compare both of these worldviews, okay, the university mindset says that these things, the Babylonian, Egyptian, the Greek culture is greater than the old theology of the Jewish Old Testament. And because we have pastors living in a church who are still trying to figure out how to put butts in the pews, the cultural churchianity has actually done the same thing. Because, as I laid out in that first video, that we have, it's an all about me, emotionalism. Let's find whatever works to make your life better. This is a hard thing to grasp, but I believe that cultural churchianity in the university has done the same thing. Now, how do we shift our perspective? The only way to shift our perspective, and I believe that this is what Ken Ham is laying out, and I believe it's the only thing that we have left in church understanding and culture, is for us to delve into these things and to be able to understand them and articulate them in such a way that the Greek mind sees the error of human wisdom. And embraces God's declarative truth. I think we're going to stop here for just a few moments. I want you to just kind of ponder where it is that you are as we've gone through this second session here. You may say, well, but I think I'm really over here. Be careful. Take a look at this idea and this little thing that we all have to deal with, and that is pride. And maybe strip that thing away and say, do I really, really hold these things greater than what the world says? Hey, thanks for tuning in this session. We'll have a next session up just as soon as we can. Thank you, and you guys have an awesome day.